Have you ever wondered if those 4 letters that define your personality really capture who you are? INTJ, INFJ, comfortable labels. But what if they were just masks your mind created to survive? Jung never wanted to classify you. He wanted to reveal something much deeper, something tests don't measure, something pulsing in the shadows of your psyche, guiding your destiny without you even noticing. There's a hidden archetype operating in you right this very moment. And when you finally recognize it, everything changes. Because you didn't come here to be a type, you came here to be whole. And that journey starts now. What if the type you identify with isn't really who you are, but just who your mind needed to become to survive? Think about that for a second. How many times have you caught yourself saying, "I'm an INTJ," or "I'm an INFJ," as if those 4 letters could sum up all the complexity of your existence? It's almost like putting on a mask and, over time, forgetting there's a face underneath it. These labels, as comfortable as they might seem, end up becoming invisible prisons, little boxes where we store entire parts of who we are. The truth is that these personality types work like simplified maps of a vastly more infinite territory. Sure, they give us some direction, but they never capture the real depth of the human psyche. It's like trying to describe the ocean by only watching the waves on the surface. You might recognize some patterns, but what's really happening in the depths remains a mystery. And maybe that's exactly where the problem lies. We cling so tightly to the map that we forget to explore the territory. What's curious is that many people find in personality tests a sense of belonging, almost as if they'd finally found their tribe. Finally, someone gets me, they think. And there's nothing wrong with that, until that understanding turns into a limitation. Until you start cutting off parts of yourself that don't fit perfectly into the description. Ever notice how sometimes you act in a way that doesn't match your type and immediately feel this weirdness, like you're betraying an identity? But here's something few people talk about. These labels were never created to define you. They were born as observation tools, not absolute truths. Thing is, at some point, the tool became a shackle. And now there are millions of people walking around the world believing they're just 4 letters, when in reality, they carry something much older, deeper, and more powerful within them. Something Jung called the living psyche, constantly moving between light and shadow. Carl Jung never wanted to create a system to label people. Actually, he was obsessed with something much bigger, understanding the secret movements of the human soul. For him, the psyche was like a living, pulsing universe, full of invisible forces dancing between the conscious and unconscious. Imagine an iceberg. The part you see floating is tiny compared to what's submerged. Jung spent his days trying to map those deep waters, not to classify people, but to reveal the mysteries they carried within themselves. He believed that every human being was unique, unrepeatable, a singular combination of light and darkness. The psychological types he proposed were just starting points, windows to look at the soul from different angles. They were never meant to become labels stuck on anyone's forehead. Jung saw the psyche as something dynamic, always transforming, like a river that never has the same water twice. When you try to capture that river in a photo and say, "There, that's what I am," you kill the movement. And without movement, there's no life. What really fascinated Jung was the tension between opposites, reason and emotion, thinking and feeling, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. For him, these polarities weren't enemies. They were partners in a complex dance that shaped each person's destiny. A healthy psyche wasn't one that chose a side and rejected the other, but one that could embrace both. It was in that integration, in that alchemical marriage of opposites, that true growth happened. But it took courage. It took looking inside without fear of what might be found. What happened is that modern psychology took these deep ideas from Jung and simplified them, turned the living soul into fixed categories, into multiple choice tests, into descriptions that fit in a social media post. It's like taking a Beethoven symphony and reducing it to 3 notes. Sure, it got easier to understand, more sellable, more digestible, but something essential got lost along the way. And that something that got lost is exactly what you need to rediscover, to break free from the illusion of labels and discover who really lives beneath the mask. When you cling too tightly to a personality type, something dangerous happens. You start defending that label as if it were your own skin. Think of a moment when someone questioned something about your type. Maybe said you didn't seem that INTJ-like, or that you were acting too emotional to be who you claimed to be. What was your reaction? You probably felt a twinge of discomfort, almost like they were attacking your identity. And that's exactly where the danger lies. When a concept becomes identity, it stops being a tool and transforms into an invisible prison. The ego loves labels because they offer predictability in a chaotic world. It's comforting to be able to say, "This is how I am," and have a ready explanation for every behavior, every choice, every reaction. But that security comes at a steep price. You stop growing. After all, if you already know who you are, why explore other possibilities? If you're the logical, strategic thinker, why should you develop your emotional intuition? If you're the sensitive visionary, why should you strengthen your capacity to act in the practical world? The type becomes a perfect excuse not to face your shadows. What's curious is that many people don't even realize they're trapped. They genuinely believe they're getting to know themselves better, when actually they're just memorizing a script written by someone else. It's like confusing the finger pointing at the moon with the moon itself. You memorize your type's characteristics, adapt your behavior to fit the description better, and little by little you cut away everything that doesn't match. That spontaneous urge to dance? No, that's not an INTJ thing. That impulse to be vulnerable? INFJs need to maintain boundaries. And so, piece by piece, you mutilate yourself to fit into a box. But here's the truth nobody tells you. The ego uses the type as a shield against the unknown. It prefers the illusion of control to the adventure of discovery. It prefers repeating familiar patterns, even if they're painful, to diving into the creative chaos of the unconscious. And as long as you're identified with that label, as long as you believe those 4 letters define who you are, you'll keep going in circles. Because beneath every mask, beneath every well-defined type, there's a much older and deeper pattern, something that can't be captured by any test. There's something operating in the depths of your psyche that no personality test can measure. Jung called this the archetype, primordial patterns of energy that shape not just who you are, but the destiny you came to fulfill in this world. Think of archetypes as invisible forces, like underwater currents directing the ship, even when the captain thinks he's in control. You might identify as INTJ or INFJ, but those letters are just the surface. What really moves you? What wakes you in the middle of the night with that inexplicable sense of purpose that comes from something much deeper? These archetypes aren't abstract concepts floating in the ether. They're living structures, loaded with symbolism and power that traverse generations and cultures. They're the same patterns that appear in ancient myths, in fairy tales, in dreams you can't forget. The sage, the magician, the hermit, the visionary. These figures aren't story characters. They're real psychic forces living inside you. And when one of these archetypes is active in your life, it doesn't ask permission. It simply manifests, guiding your choices, your relationships, your obsessions. The problem is, most people live their entire lives without realizing which archetype is running the show. They look at their own existence through the limited lens of personality type and completely miss the bigger narrative. It's like watching an epic movie on a 5-inch screen. You see something, sure, but you lose the grandeur, the depth, the details that make everything make sense. And when you don't recognize the archetype inhabiting you, you end up being lived by it, instead of consciously collaborating with its energy. Now here's what few people understand. The hidden archetype isn't something you choose. It chooses you. It appears in your recurring dreams, in your inexplicable obsessions, in those moments when you feel you're fulfilling something greater than yourself. It reveals itself in your contradictions, those parts of you that don't make sense within your type, but carry an undeniable truth. And it's precisely in those contradictions, in those spaces where the map fails, that the archetype whispers its true name. There are people who seem to walk between two worlds. They live here, in this tangible reality, but carry with them a constant connection to something invisible, something pulsing beyond appearances. They're the minds that see patterns where others see only chaos, who feel truths before they become evident, who catch whispers of the future while the rest of humanity is still stuck in the present. Jung recognized these souls, called them rare, not out of elitism, but because they genuinely operated on a different frequency than most. These people carry a peculiar weight, the loneliness of seeing what others can't see. Imagine being in a room full of people, everyone laughing and chatting about trivialities, while you perceive the invisible emotional currents connecting each person, the unspoken dramas, the perfectly adjusted masks. You didn't choose to have this sharp perception. It's just there, like a sixth sense that never turns off. And the more you try to explain what you see, the more you realize that words fail, that most people don't have the references to understand. So you learn to stay quiet. But that quietness isn't peace. It's voluntary exile. The rare soul frequently withdraws from the world, not out of arrogance, but from exhaustion of being misunderstood. It gets used to living between worlds, participating superficially in social conventions while its true life happens internally, in constant dialogue with symbols, intuitions, and visions that can't be shared. It's like being fluent in a language nobody else speaks. You can even translate some things, but the essence, the true flavor of the words, gets completely lost in translation. What few of these souls realize is the paradox that defines them. They're simultaneously attracted to and repelled by humanity. They feel a deep compassion, a genuine desire to help, to share their visions. But they also recognize the impossibility of forcing someone to see what they're not yet ready to see. So they wait, they observe, they guard their insights like seeds, waiting for fertile soil. And in that waiting, in that living between the inner calling and the outer world, something begins to form in the shadows. Something they haven't noticed yet, but that's about to change everything. The greater the light of consciousness, the denser the shadow it casts. That's a truth the rare soul rarely wants to admit. It takes pride in its depth, in its capacity to see beyond, to understand the invisible, but avoids looking at its own darkness with the same intensity. It's as if all that sharp perception, all that powerful intuition, had a price that needs to be paid. And that price appears in the form of everything that was repressed, denied, swept under the carpet of consciousness, while the person was busy being special. Emotional repression is the rare mind's favorite shadow. While it's up there, sailing in the realms of ideas and visions, there's an inner child screaming for attention, asking to be seen, felt, embraced, but recognizing that need would mean admitting vulnerability. And vulnerability doesn't match the image of the self-sufficient visionary. So the person develops an almost schizophrenic relationship with themselves, capable of deep empathy for others, but brutally insensitive to their own wounds, able to predict others' emotional patterns, but completely ignoring their own until they explode in unexpected ways. There's also the trap of superiority disguised as difference. The rare soul often convinces itself that its loneliness is noble, that its isolation is necessary, that ordinary people simply can't reach its level of understanding. But that narrative, as seductive as it may be, is just the ego building walls and calling them temples. The uncomfortable truth is that part of this separation doesn't come from genuine difference, but from fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of not belonging, fear of discovering that maybe you're not so different after all. So you isolate yourself first, before the world can isolate you. Self-sufficiency becomes another dangerous shadow. I don't need anyone, the person says, as if emotional independence were a spiritual achievement. But what Jung discovered is that individuation isn't isolation, it's integration. You don't grow by becoming an island, you grow by learning to relate deeply while keeping your essence intact. when the rare soul rejects the need for genuine human connection, when it transforms its loneliness into identity, it interrupts its own transformation process. Because the shadow can only be integrated through the encounter with the other. And that encounter is exactly what it's been avoiding. Medieval alchemists weren't just trying to turn lead into gold. They were encoding the process of human soul transformation. Jung understood this deeply. For him, true alchemy happened within the psyche, at the moment when seemingly irreconcilable opposites began to dance together. Reason and emotion, intuition and instinct, light and shadow. These pairs aren't enemies waging eternal war. They're partners in a sacred marriage, waiting for you to have enough courage to unite them. And it's in that union, in that embrace of contradictions, that something completely new is born. Most people spend their entire lives choosing sides. If you're logical, you reject the emotional. If you're intuitive, you despise the practical. If you're spiritual, you condemn the material. It's like trying to live with half your body amputated and wondering why you can't walk straight. True power, that kind of force that transforms destinies, doesn't come from choosing one polarity and fortifying it to exhaustion. It comes from learning to hold both at the same time without collapsing under the tension of that contradiction. Is it uncomfortable? Absolutely. Is it impossible? Far from it. Think of someone who's developed a sharp, analytical mind, capable of dissecting any problem with surgical precision. That's a real achievement, no doubt. But if that same person never learned to feel, to be present with emotions, without needing to explain or solve them, they're operating at half their potential. Now imagine the opposite. Someone deeply sensitive, empathetic, capable of navigating emotional worlds with mastery, but who panics when they need to make practical decisions, structure their life, transform vision into action. Both are trapped in a prison of one-sided competence. Integration demands something radical. You need to embrace exactly what you've always rejected in yourself. If you've lived as the cold strategist, you need to descend into the body and feel. If you've lived as the sensitive dreamer, you need to learn to act in the world with firmness. It's not about abandoning your strengths. It's about stopping using your strengths as an excuse to avoid your weaknesses. When you finally manage to hold these opposites without collapsing them into one or the other, something extraordinary starts to happen. A third element emerges, something that's neither one nor the other, but a living synthesis of both. There's a moment in the journey when everything changes. It's not dramatic, doesn't come with fireworks or celestial revelations. It's quiet, almost imperceptible, like waking from a dream and realizing you've always been awake. Suddenly, you look at those 4 letters that defined your identity for so long and recognize this was never you. It was just a door, an entry point, an invitation to begin the exploration. The type was the map that brought you here, but now you're standing before the real territory, vast and unexplored, and the map simply doesn't work anymore. This awakening usually happens through crises. Maybe it's a relationship that implodes precisely because you refuse to leave your comfortable patterns. Maybe it's an opportunity you miss because you were too busy being consistent with your self-image. Or maybe it's simply that growing sense of emptiness, that voice whispering that you're living a reduced version of yourself. Jung said the psyche has its own wisdom. When you refuse to grow consciously, it creates situations that force you to grow, and those situations are rarely gentle. When the hidden archetype begins to awaken, you realize it was always there. Those strange dreams you ignored, they were messages from it. Those inexplicable obsessions, those interests that didn't make sense within your type. They were clues. Those contradictions that bothered you, those parts of you that seemed not to belong. They were fragments of it trying to emerge. The archetype isn't something you need to create or conquer. It's something you need to recognize and allow. Like a seed that's always been in the soil, waiting for the right conditions to germinate. The big shift happens when you stop trying to fit your life into a narrow narrative and start living from wholeness. You stop asking, is this an INTJ thing? Or Would an INFJ do this? And start asking, is this true for me? You stop editing your experiences to fit a personality description and start honoring every impulse, every contradiction, every movement of the soul, even when they don't make logical sense. Because the self, that deep center Jung spent his life trying to describe, doesn't care about superficial coherence. It cares about integrity, about lived truth, about the courage to be whole. Jung had a name for this process of becoming whole: individuation. It's not about becoming special, unique, or different from others. It's about becoming who you always were, before the masks, before the labels, before you learn to mold yourself to fit the world's expectations. The personality type, in this journey, is just an initial stage. It's like learning the alphabet before writing poetry. Necessary? Maybe. Sufficient? Never. Because life isn't asking you to be a perfect INTJ or an exemplary INFJ. It's asking you to be you in your messy and contradictory completeness. Individuation isn't a destination you reach, and that's it. Mission accomplished. It's a path that unfolds continuously, an eternal conversation between who you think you are and who you're really becoming. Every time you integrate a shadow, another aspect emerges asking for attention. Every time you embrace a contradiction, another reveals itself in the depths. It's like peeling an infinite onion. But instead of finding emptiness at the center, you find something alive, pulsing, impossible to name completely. And the further you go, the more you realize you were never seeking a fixed answer. You were seeking the capacity to dance with mystery. What's curious is that many people abandon the journey precisely when it gets interesting. They learn some self-knowledge techniques, read some books, take some tests, and think they've arrived. Ah, now I understand myself, they say, as if the human being were a math problem that can be solved once and for all. But Jung knew the psyche doesn't work that way. It's organic, alive, always revealing new layers. The person you were 5 years ago isn't the person you are now, and won't be the person you'll be 5 years from now. Unless, of course, you've stopped growing. Living beyond type means accepting that you'll never be totally comprehensible, not even to yourself. It means carrying your contradictions with grace instead of trying to resolve them. It means stopping the search for a fixed identity and starting to inhabit the process of constant transformation. When you finally let go of the need to define yourself, something deep relaxes inside you. You stop defending yourself, stop justifying yourself, stop trying to prove you're this or that. And in that space of surrender, something bigger than you, something that's always been waiting patiently, begins to live through you, guiding your steps with a wisdom no test could ever measure. So, after all this, the question that remains is, what are you going to do now? Will you keep hiding behind 4 letters, pretending they sum up the immensity of what you carry inside? Or will you have the courage to drop the map and finally explore the territory? Because it's one thing to watch this video, nod your head, feel that spine-tingling recognition. It's something completely different to wake up tomorrow and start living a new way. The rare soul doesn't return to the world shouting truths. It returns in silence, carrying a wisdom that doesn't need to be explained, only lived. And maybe you're one of those souls. Think with me. What part of you is asking for integration right this very moment? What shadow have you been avoiding looking at because it's easier to stay in the comfort zone of your self-image? What contradiction inside you is screaming for attention, but you keep silencing it because it doesn't match your type? Write it here in the comments. No filter, no fear of judgment. What's the hidden archetype you feel pulsing in the depths, but never had the courage to name? Because when you put it into words, when you admit it out loud, something shifts. The psyche responds. And maybe your answer is exactly what someone else here needs to read to begin their own journey. Now, if this video stirred something in you, if it hit different, if you felt that chest tightness of someone recognizing an inconvenient truth, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because we're going to keep diving into these deep waters. There's so much more to explore about Jung, about archetypes, about how to break free from illusions and start truly living. This is just the beginning. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. And since you made it this far, since you're clearly not the type who settles for shallow, superficial content, there's another video on the end screen that'll expand even more on what we talked about today. Click on it. Continue this journey. Because the rare soul that exists in you isn't satisfied with ready-made answers. It wants truth, depth, real transformation. And I'm here to walk with you through this process. See you in the next video. And remember, you were never just a type. You've always been so much more.